But for now, we're going to go to the two blokes who talk more common sense than the rest of the country put together. That is the Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Blair and the Stepmates Studios animator Mark Nicholson, also kangaroo wrestler, as we discovered last week. Great to talk to you guys. Now, this, I think, will come as a shock to both of you. And it seems that in our political world, Tim, you go first, we can't trust any politicians anymore. They lie.
I mean, I was all prepared to oppose this suggestion. It was going to be right in the corner of our beloved politicians. Right up until just before the commercial break, when we saw the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, saying that, Labor is the only party that stands for restoration. Labor is the only party that stands for Australia. He can't even believe it, surely, because if all of that was true...
Why would Labor have ever lost a single election?
Labor is the party for aspiration because they can get a bloke like him who can spend all his life only working for the Labor Party, and now he's on 400 grand running this nation's coffers. Tim, Mark, it blew up a bit in Parliament this week, where some references to famous movies when Dan Tehan had this to say to the government.
Goes to relevance. You can't handle the truth. And that's what the Queen...
What do you reckon of his Nicholson impersonation?
Mate, it must have been KFC day at Parliament House that day because they were throwing around zingers all over the place. Albo was naming Jack Nicholson films. Even Dan Tehan's there, throwing out absolute zingers, getting himself kicked out. I think, Milton Dick, my boy, he said that this is not the Academy Awards, but I don't think he realises how much there is crossover with the Academy Awards. It's a bunch of egotistical maniacs sitting in a room together pretending for a living. These people are pretending to care. And of course, just like the Academy Awards, no one's really watching. That's the real shame with Question Time, because it's very, very entertaining. But to your point, to your question, though, it's like, can you trust politicians? I guess we can just trust them to be politicians. That's all we can trust them in.
Exactly. They're being very true to form. Tim, I've got to get your thoughts on the latest developments in our renewable energy sector with a wind farm north of Adelaide, the wonderful sheep and wheat farming area of Red Hill, and talk us through what happens to this turbine. This started the bushfire. This could have been catastrophic. Instead, it seems to be mildly costly and embarrassing.
Yeah, whenever they go up, our wind turbines, sometimes they create these lovely sort of circular smoke figures, and if they weren't creating non-existent or expensive and useless electricity, you could probably get an arts grant for some sort of sky decoration claim, something like that. Yeah, if you get those blades spinning, which again is something they're hopeless at doing. There's a bit of a land clearing after the harvest.
I wonder if all those is all that smoke actually counted as carbon emissions against this supposedly clean energy project?
Ridiculous. Chris Kenny, don't be insane. That's crazy talk. That's like counting volcanoes. They're all swept aside. It doesn't matter. The only things that are counted are bad things done by you, me, Mark. I mean, right. let's get Mark involved with his carbon-intensive cartoon process. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that burning turbine, that's good CO2 emissions. There's good CO2. Now, speaking of electric technology, Mark, it's hilarious in the UK where EV sales apparently have plummeted, and they're blaming Rowan Atkinson. They're blaming Mr. Bean because he wrote a piece critical of his experiences with an electric vehicle.
An honest piece from a guy who's famous for playing a guy who can't think for a living. It's absolutely absurd. Rowan Atkinson is actually a really clever guy. He's got a degree in engineering. He knows his stuff. He's got an awesome car collection, and he got duped by the electric car industry. That's all he did. He's just said, hey, I got duped. Maybe you will too. Just be cautious. I think he should lean into it. I think we should see Mr. Bean, Mr. Bean Goes Electric as a new film or something, and he just gets in the car. It'll be a comedy of errors, but none of it's his fault. None of it's a typical Mr. Bean problem. The car just runs out of power. It catches on fire. Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, why wouldn't the politicians of Lords and the Commons blame their failures over electric vehicles on this man? Oh, Tim, he clearly knows what he's talking about.
I mean, as Mark mentioned, this is basically the plot of every Mr. Bean sketch. That all these clever people have these great plans and this great organisation. In this case, we have massive global government and industry work and efforts all to drive towards one thing, and it gets derailed by one guy who plays an idiot on TV. It's so fantastic. It's adorable.
No, nothing wrong with the technology. It's all about Mr. Bean. Yeah. Now, I'm going to go to a frightening crash now into the real world now. Not the Mr. Bean character, but this bloke you're about to say is the real President of the United States, the actual leader of the free world, and he seems to forget the name of Hamas.
There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas, but it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is.
Oh, dear, Mark. He couldn't even think of, the bad guys.
I'm surprised you even played this on telly, mate. The time expenditure to get that one segment out, I nearly fell asleep here. The only solace I have is the fact that he's got his finger on, he's got the nuclear codes, but I don't know if he'd be able to operate the tech. Thank goodness. Like, you'd open it up and you're like, come on, man. Thank God he doesn't know how to operate the technology, because we'd all be up in smoke.
Well, I'm going to show, before I get your thoughts, Tim, I'm going to show you another clip from the day before. This is the president, and before you look at this, I think I should remind viewers that Francois Mitterrand was president of France, but he left office in the 1990s and actually died in 1996. But here's Joe Biden this week.
Right after I was elected, I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. And I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from France looked at me and said, why, how long are you back for?
Tim, who knew they had Ouija boards at NATO?
Yeah, Mitterrand from Germany, from France, from beyond the grave. He just kept reaching. But the response from Ghost Mitterrand sounded kind of like what you'd expect from a guy who's been dead for nearly 30 years. So, good for that. It was fantastic.
Oh, it's very funny, yet very, very frightening at the same time. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim and Mark. I appreciate it. Catch you next week.